We'll just ignore that. Shalom, Havarim! Hello, friends. Oh, my goodness. I know that many of you are very well aware that in the last couple of generations, more and more women have entered into the workplace. And during that time, we've had to make some adjustments. We've had to change some things, even like how we refer to certain positions. We've had to alter that. For instance, for all my growing up years, we referred to the person that brought our mail as the mailman. Well, a few years ago, we realized that our mailman was not a man. She was a woman. So it's very awkward to refer to Agnes as the mailman. And I found out that recently the mail carriers, they prefer to be called letter carriers. That's their preferred term. So a teacher was trying to teach her children the non-gender specific way to refer to a mail carrier, a letter carrier, that they prefer this term letter carrier. So the teacher asked her class, she said, does anybody know how to use letter carrier in a sentence? And of course, there's that one boy who stands up, he raises his hand, his name is Johnny. Johnny says, I know how to use the word in a sentence. And Johnny stood up and said, okay, well, we just got back from vacation. And my mom packed so much. She had several suitcases, and my dad was getting really angry at her. So he said to me, let her carry her own luggage. I know, it's like a long setup for that. If you look around, you may notice we are missing a lot of people. It is the end of summer. Many people are traveling. Many people are on vacation because last year at this time, we were stuck. We couldn't go places. We had to stay inside. The virus was kind of at its peak. So now here we are over a year later, and people have money burning in their pockets. You've got those coupons or vouchers that you couldn't use last year, and people are using those now. Maybe you have a little bit of money from those stimulus checks in your checking account. Or maybe you just have money left over because last year we couldn't do stuff. Or maybe you spent it all on something else. I don't know. Some of you are looking at each other like, nope, I ain't got no money left over. But this has been a big year, a big summer for travel. We've seen this, it's been especially true in like 4th of July weekend. A month ago, I think was the heaviest traveled weekend in some years. So people are going places. People are taking time off work. You've had vacation time accumulate. And I know even some of you that never take time off recently took some time off, right? If you don't use it, you lose it. So you've got to use this time off. So do you know how I feel about all these people traveling? Do you know how I feel about all these people taking time off and time away? Do you know how that makes me feel? I feel like you've earned it. I feel like we have earned it. Because if you haven't noticed, this has been a really, really hard 18 months or so. This has been extremely challenging on all of us. And we need a break. We need to rest. Now, here's the thing about rest. I believe very strongly that we were made to need rest. This is the way that God designed us. So if you don't think you need a break, if you don't think you need a rest, you are actually going against the way God designed us. So don't resist. Don't resist the need to rest. I mean, maybe right now, during the sermon, Marlene, I see you over there. Maybe now if you're feeling tired, try to resist a little bit. But we are made to rest. We are designed by our Creator to rest. So today I want to talk about resting a little bit and the cycles of rest that we require. And I want to defend rest. That's what my title of my sermon is today. It's In Defense of Rest. Because do we really think we know better than God? A God who created us to need rest? No. This is the way we were made. So we need to learn to slow down and listen. A couple of months ago, I think it was 2 months ago, I spoke on our need to slow down and listen to God. Slow down and enjoy the quiet, the stillness around us, and listen to how God's speaking to us. Today I want to talk about slowing down and listening to ourselves, listening to our bodies and what our bodies are telling us. All right, so we're going to start with a biblical overview. And I say start, it's probably going to be half of the sermon. We're going to have a biblical overview of rest. And I had Sonia read 3 different scriptures for us today. The first one came from Genesis chapter 2. Now, you don't have to be a Bible scholar to know that that is really early in the Bible. Like, think about this. When was the first time the Bible talks about rest? Well, it's literally in my Bible, it's on page 2. So it must be somewhat important. It's somewhat significant. Because we read there in the first chapter of Genesis that God created the heavens and the earth and the animals and the creatures and the 2-legged animals, the people like us, the animals, the thinking animals. And after God created all of this stuff, what did God do? God took a vacation. And God just says, God rested on the 7th day. Now, I think we can be a little misled by that as well, because some people will come out of this and have this theology that says, well, we must rest because even God had to rest. And I want to say that that's almost right, but we need to be careful, because I don't like the thought that God needs to rest. I think what's going on here is something different. God modeled rest for us. And I also believe that God only took this one opportunity. This is the only time that the Bible says that God rested. Because think about it like this. If God rested every 7th day, can you imagine that? Like, if somebody has a prayer request, they're praying to God, God, help us out here. God's like, oh, I'm sorry. Not today. I'm on vacation. Good luck with that whole heart attack thing, buddy. No. Or how many of you ever get email responses from people who have this automated responses when they're away from home, and it says, thank you for your email. I'll get back to you in a few days. I'm sorry, I'm on vacation. What if God had an automated response? Thank you for your prayer request. I'm currently away from the office. I'll be back on Monday, and I'll tend to things like, running the world then. It's just silly to think of it like that. So anytime someone says God needs to rest, I want to say, no, I don't think God needs to rest. God taught us to rest. Now things get a little bit more confusing, a little bit more challenging when we think about Jesus. Here in the church we teach that Jesus was God. Jesus is God, fully God. But we also know that Jesus needed rest. We know that Jesus slept. We know that Jesus frequently took breaks, that Jesus went off to the mountains to pray by himself, kind of to get away even from his disciples. Like, I need a break from these guys. Jesus rested. And I think the reason Jesus rested is because of his humanity. Jesus was 100% God and 100% humanity. The part of Jesus that needed rest was the human part. He needed to rest. He needed to rejuvenate, recharge his batteries to get caught up. And I think also that he showed us as a model how we too should rest. So in God, in the creation story, and in Jesus, we see our need to rest. We see this modeled for us. But not only does God tell us that we should rest, God tells us we must rest. This was not only a suggestion, it was a commandment. Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. I know Sabbath is a weird word, isn't it? And we don't use that in any other part of the English vernacular. But Sabbath is literally, it's just a Hebrew word, and for some reason we anglicize it a little bit. We take the H from the beginning and put it on the end. So in Hebrew, the word is Shabbat. Let's say that together, because I know you're resting. Everybody say Shabbat. Shabbat is just the original word Sabbath. And you know what Shabbat means? It just means rest. So remember the rest and keep it holy. Now, what is the rest? They're referring to God's rest. Remember the rest. Remember to keep it separate from the other days. To be holy means to be separated from something. Keep this one day a week separate from all the other days, because God had to rest, and you need a rest. I said that wrong. I shouldn't say God had to rest. God chose to rest, and we need to rest. But notice that passage. Something's really easy to miss. It's not just you that needs the rest. It's you, your servant, the foreigners living among you, those would be the Gentiles, and what else? The animals. This is more than just a rest for you. It's more than just a nap in the afternoon. It's something radically different. I think that this helps me to think about my own growing up years. I've mentioned a time or two so far today that I grew up on a farm. And growing up on the farm, we have chores you have to do every day, right? You have to feed the animals. You have to milk the cows. If you don't do these things, these animals aren't going to be around long. So there's things you have to do. But there were also things that we didn't have to do. Growing up, we never did field work on a Sunday. That was our day of rest. So you got your chores done in the morning, you went to church, and the afternoon was usually spent just kind of chilling a little bit, maybe catching up with some friends or family. To be honest, spent a lot of time doing this with the feet up. That was our Sunday afternoon. Now, I remember when we were growing up, we almost always had a hired man on the farm. There was somebody that was employed to work on the farm, and this person was always paid salary. That means that no matter how many hours they put in, they always got paid the same amount. And I recall very clearly a Sunday afternoon. We were sitting there probably watching television, watching some old family-friendly show. Let's say we were watching Lassie. That'll work. It was probably wrestling, but we'll call it Lassie. We were watching Lassie, and I saw my dad perk up, and he got up, and he just ran outside to the field. And this is significant because I've only seen my dad run twice in my life. So Dad gets up, he runs out to the field. He heard something, and what's going on? We go out and we see a hired man is hauling manure. And my dad went out and he stopped him. He said, "We don't do that on Sundays. Sundays are a day of rest." But if you think about that, how weird is that? Because my dad actually stood to benefit from this guy hauling manure. Like I said, he was on salary. He didn't have to get paid anymore by doing this work on Sunday. But Dad instead said, "Go home and rest." It was important to my dad that this guy rested. So when the text tells us to even have your servants rest, this is more than just about finding a few Z's and catching up on your sleep. I think that what's going on here is we see a pause in the economic system. The people who follow the God of Israel are called to stop and think a minute. Because this is about more than just making money. Yeah, sure, 6 days a week, work hard, earn all the money you can, give a portion of that to the church, tithe, that's great. But don't make it all about the money. On the seventh day, we're called to rest. All right, let's go to one more. If you go to Leviticus chapter 25, and I know that everybody read Leviticus this morning. That's what you do. Actually, last week Lois opened with the passage from, was it Leviticus? No, it was Lamentations. I'm like, oh no, what is she choosing? Everybody turned to Lamentations. Like, oh, yeah. Leviticus is about the same thing. There's some jewels in there. The other parts are really, that's a downer. Anyway, Leviticus chapter 25. God tells us that even the land needs a break. Every 7 years, the Israelite people were to leave their ground fallow. That means to not plant anything in it and to not harvest anything that they have planted before. So even if they had established a vineyard, they weren't to go and pluck those grapes. They were to live for a full year off of things they had previously collected and off of things that were growing wild, like berries and nuts. Now, if you think about it like this, think about the soil around here in Virginia. About 100 years ago, the soil here had become very depleted. A lot of people had come and they farmed this land and they farmed it hard, especially the tobacco farmers. They farmed this area really hard. And 100 years ago, we didn't have some of the things that we have now, like chemical fertilizers, and we didn't know to rotate crops, didn't have no-till planting. So the soil was depleted, all the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potassium, all those things had been drawn out of the soil and used to grow crops without being replenished. So the best thing to do, back before we had all these modern agricultural practices, was every so often, just let the land sit. Like, don't do anything. When you notice your harvest is getting to be less and less every year, just stop and give it a break. And I know this probably seems counterintuitive, because it seems counterintuitive to me. Because if you are the farmer and you are relying upon a crop to feed your family, say you are growing wheat, and you need wheat to make bread, if 1 year your yield, your harvest is way down, the first thing that goes through your mind is, well, I guess next year we won't plant anything. No. But that's exactly what God tells the people to do. And I think there's two things that we can learn from this, probably multiple things, but two things I want to lift out. The first is just how much trust that requires. Just how much you have to trust God to not plant something after a bad harvest the year before. Trust that God will provide for you. And the other thing I want to point out is that this makes a wonderful metaphor for ourselves. Imagine that you are a field. What kind of field are you going to be? I know, I put you on the spot. A cornfield? Okay, a cornfield. We're all a little corny here, right? Okay. All right, imagine you're a cornfield. You've been planting corn on corn on corn year after year after year, and soon you notice that things are just not working. You're not doing nearly as much as you used to. You can't produce at the same level. You're just feeling depleted and empty and worn out. And you know that you have to change something, but it doesn't sound right just to stop. You can't just stop, because then you'll have zero harvest. You'll have zero yield. But what if pausing, what if stopping just for a little bit was truly what was best for you and for your family? Okay, I'm going to start mixing metaphors. You ever hear people say, don't mix metaphors? Get out your bowl and spoon. I'm going to mix a bunch of them here together. So first we have this idea of this land totally depleted, not able to produce at the level it should. When we talk about self-care and getting rest, there's often this person that's quoted. His name is somewhere here in my notes. His name is Norm Kelly. Norm Kelly is the guy that said, you can't pour from an empty glass. Have you heard that before? All right, so you have a glass of water. There's only so much you can share, only so much you can do. When that gets empty, you can't pour from an empty glass. Hold that in your mind for a second. Back in January of 2010, a major earthquake hit the small island nation of Haiti. This nation that's already been devastated in a number of ways, as it's economically impoverished. A severe earthquake shook the grounds, literally, and many people were killed. Many people lost homes and businesses. Now, our Mennonite church agencies have a relationship with Haiti. They have, over the years, developed churches there and sent missionaries there. They've done development work in Haiti. So in the weeks and months following this earthquake, our agencies decided that they wanted to send medical work teams to Haiti. So I think teams went for maybe 2 weeks or so at a time. And a lot of people from our community and our area went on these trips. One of them was Dr. Richard Alderfer. Anybody know Dr. Dick? Okay, Richard used to be a member at Springdale Mennonite Church, so a local guy. Richard, he went on this trip, and he was serving the community and doing these things, working with a number of other medical professionals. And while he's working, he's building a relationship with all sorts of people, and he notices that one of the nurses one day decides that she's not going to eat. Everybody else stops, and they're eating, and she just keeps on working. So his first thought is, okay, well, maybe she's not hungry, and maybe she's in the middle of something. She'll come back, and she'll do that later. She'll get something to eat later. But he noticed this was a pattern. she skipped the next meal as well, and the meal after that. And after she skipped a few meals, he realized what was going on. Because this nurse didn't want to eat food that could go to help one of the starving people of Haiti. So Dr. Alderfer had to take her aside, and he said to her, I see what you're doing. And I really respect and appreciate that. But if you don't care for yourself, you can't care for the others. You can't pour from an empty cup. Let's mix in one more metaphor. I recently read an article by a pastor named Jenny Smith. And this article was called The Second Marathon. And it was written for pastors, but I think that the whole idea will apply to everybody here. Like, everybody will be able to connect to this in some way. So Pastor Smith was writing about coming out of the pandemic, and she says, hey, in the last year and a half, we have been running a marathon. We have been through it all. We have had to first learn how to shut down churches for a period of time, and the stress involved in just making the decision to not meet as a church. Then we had to learn how to be videographers, and as you've seen earlier, some of us are still learning this. We had to learn how to upload these things and be YouTube specialists and Facebook Live specialists and Zoom. We had to learn how to do visitations differently. We started doing porch visitations. We started doing FaceTime visitations. We had to learn how to do budgets differently. We had to learn how to care for people differently. In the middle of this, we had an election. In the middle of this, we had a resurrection. We had an insurrection. Those are very different things. We had an insurrection. We had to deal with anti-maskers and maskers and vaxxers and anti-vaxxers. In the midst of all this, the church was divided. This was our first marathon. Now read this in her words. She says this, Then we opened our doors to in-person worship again. We crossed the finish line. We made it. We did a hard thing. Then, instead of collapsing at the finish line in a heap, instead of drinking water, instead of resting our aching bodies, something else happened. An official-looking race organizer slapped another number on our back and pushed us toward another starting line that mysteriously appeared. Wait, what? A second marathon right now? We look down at our blistered, aching feet, our hopeful but exhausted heart, our overwhelmed but determined mind, and we take a step forward into life as a gathered community once again. Why? Because our world doesn't know how to stop. I think many of us are feeling that right now. And you don't have to be a pastor. You could be a lay person. You can be a stay-at-home dad. You could be an executive on Wall Street. Whatever your lot in life may be, we're coming out of this thing and we're feeling it. I need time to ice my knees. They're getting old. I need time to catch my breath. But no, the second marathon is upon us. This is how Pastor Smith suggests we move on. She says, yes, our second marathon has begun, ready or not. Problem is, our bodies are still recovering from the first marathon. Maybe the answer is to stop running the second race. What if we looked at each other and gently nodded, slowed our forced jog, and started walking together? What if we walked our second marathon, side by side, no racing, no competing with anything or anyone, resting when it's time to rest, saying yes to a new idea when it glistens with possibility, saying no when something feels too heavy, asking new questions in places we assume the old answer, giving others permission to rest because we choose to rest, questioning the speed at which we live and move, loving our people with beautiful boundaries in place, taking a nap, going to therapy and spiritual direction because we're humans too, breathing deeply of God's grace and love and restoration. Maybe this is how we disrupt the deeply ingrained oppressive realities of our world. We choose to walk together. So how do we begin this new normal? I believe that we begin by listening to our bodies. What are our bodies telling us? As I said to the kids, different people need different amounts of rest. Be aware of what your body's telling you. Because if you don't care for yourself, you can't do the things God's called you to do. If you don't care for yourself, you can't love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't care for yourself, you can't give your full self to God. I believe that we begin by resting. So I'm going to give you all homework today. I want you to go home and take a nap. I want you to sleep in a little later tomorrow morning. And if you can't sleep in tomorrow morning, go to sleep a little later tonight. That's the hard part, I know. Take time for yourself. Fill that hot bubble bath and lock the door. Enjoy the gift that God has given to us in rest. We were made with the need to rest. And I think it begins by listening to ourselves. It begins with us connecting with our Lord. It begins with us listening to the one that said to us, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." So today we are going to start that practice by listening to the commandments of Jesus, not only to rest, but to remember him. Remember the one that invited us to come to him to find rest, to find time to connect with God, to find time to connect with others. It was on the night when Jesus was betrayed